My sister's ex-husband is dating our stepmom and got her pregnant. Family drama reaches new heights when our long-lost father returns with a dark secret. I, 35F, never thought I'd be sharing such a complicated family situation, but here I am. To understand the whole story, I need to give you some background about my family and how we got to this point. My parents, Deborah, 60F, and Alan, 62M, met in college. They were the typical college sweethearts. Deborah was studying nursing, and Alan was pursuing a business degree. They got married right after graduation, and within a few years, they had my sister Ellie, 38F, and me. From the outside, we looked like the perfect little family. But things weren't as rosy as they seemed. Alan struggled to find a stable job after college, jumping from one startup to another. His inability to provide consistently for the family led to frequent arguments with Deborah. To make ends meet, Deborah started working long hours as a nurse, often taking night shifts at the local hospital. I have vivid memories of those early years. Ellie and I would often be left with our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, while Mom worked and Dad was out networking or working on his latest business idea. Mrs. Peterson was kind but strict, and her house always smelled of mothballs and cat litter. We spent many evenings there, doing homework at her kitchen table or watching old game shows on her tiny TV. The tension at home kept building. I remember one particularly bad fight when I was 9. Dad had invested a significant chunk of their savings into a friend's restaurant venture without consulting Mom. The restaurant failed within 6 months, and we lost everything. That night, I heard Mom crying in the bathroom, and Dad slept on the couch. It was the beginning of the end for their marriage. They divorced when I was 10 and Ellie was 13. Dad moved out, and within a year, he had relocated to another state for a new job opportunity. He promised to stay in touch and visit often, but those promises quickly faded. His calls became less frequent, and visits were rare. Eventually, he was reduced to a voice on the phone during birthdays and holidays. Mom did her best to keep our lives as normal as possible. She picked up extra shifts at the hospital and even started doing some private nursing on the side. Money was always tight, but she made sure we never went hungry. Ellie and I learned to be independent early on. We became experts at making microwave dinners and doing our own laundry. Despite the financial struggles, those years brought Ellie and me closer. We shared a small bedroom in our tiny apartment, staying up late talking about school, friends, and our dreams for the future. Ellie wanted to be a teacher, inspired by her favorite English teacher, Mrs. Hanson. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted a job that would allow me to help Mom retire comfortably someday. When I was 16, our lives changed dramatically. Mom met Robert, 58M, at a hospital fundraiser. Robert was a successful businessman who had recently moved to our city to expand his tech company. He was charming, kind, and clearly smitten with Mom. Within a year, they were married, and we moved into Robert's big house in the suburbs. The transition wasn't easy. Robert had 2 children from his previous marriage, Chris, 36M, and Connie, 34F. Suddenly, our family of 3 had doubled in size. The house was spacious, but it felt strange after years of living in our cozy apartment. Ellie and I shared a room again, while Chris and Connie each had their own. I remember feeling a mix of excitement and resentment, excited about the new opportunities this change might bring, but resentful of the attention Mom gave to Chris and Connie, trying to make them feel welcome. Robert's ex-wife, Gladys, 55F, was still in the picture. She lived nearby and had shared custody of Chris and Connie. At first, Gladys seemed nice enough. She was polite during drop-offs and pickups, and even attended some of the kids' school events alongside Mom and Robert. But there was always an undercurrent of tension, especially when it came to decisions about the kids' education or extracurricular activities. Over time, we all started to adjust to our new family dynamic. Robert was kind and treated Ellie and me like his own daughters. He took an interest in our education and future plans. When he found out about Ellie's dream of becoming a teacher, he started a college fund for her. He did the same for me, even though I was still unsure about my career path. After high school, Ellie went to the state university to study education. I decided to attend a local college, majoring in marketing. Robert paid for both of our educations, something we never thought possible before. During those college years, our blended family settled into a comfortable routine. We had Sunday dinners together when everyone was in town, celebrated holidays as one big group, and even took a few family vacations. After college, I started my career in marketing at a small agency in the city. Ellie became an elementary school teacher, fulfilling her childhood dream. We both moved out of the family home but stayed in the same city. Life seemed to be on track for all of us. Ellie met her husband, Nathan, 40M, at a teachers' conference when she was 25. Nathan was a high school history teacher, charming and well-liked by everyone he met. They dated for 2 years before getting married in a beautiful ceremony that Robert insisted on paying for. I was Ellie's maid of honor, and I remember thinking during their first dance that I'd never seen my sister look so happy. Everything seemed perfect for a while. Nathan fit seamlessly into our family. He got along well with Robert, often discussing history and politics over beers during family barbecues. He was respectful to Mom and Gladys, and he even managed to bridge some of the lingering tension between them. Nathan and Ellie seemed happy, and they often talked about their plans for the future, including having kids soon. But about 3 years into their marriage, cracks started to show. Ellie confided in me that Nathan had become distant. He was working late more often, citing extra responsibilities at school. But when Ellie offered to help him grade papers or plan lessons, he'd brush her off. She suspected he might be cheating but had no proof. I encouraged her to talk to him, but she was afraid of confrontation. This went on for months, with Ellie becoming more withdrawn and unhappy. Then, last Thanksgiving, everything exploded. We were all gathered at Robert and Mom's house for dinner. Nathan was there too, acting as if nothing was wrong. The tension was palpable, but everyone was trying to maintain the facade of a happy family gathering. Halfway through the meal, as Robert was carving the turkey and Mom was passing around the mashed potatoes, Ellie couldn't take it anymore. She stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor, and announced to everyone that she knew Nathan had been cheating on her. What happened next was like a scene from a bad movie. Nathan didn't deny it. Instead, he looked right at Gladys, and they shared a guilty look. It turned out that Nathan had been having an affair with Gladys for over a year. They had reconnected at a school fundraiser where Gladys was volunteering, and things had escalated from there. The room erupted into chaos. Mom dropped the bowl of mashed potatoes, sending them splattering across the dining room floor. Robert was yelling, his face red with anger. Chris and Connie sat in stunned silence, looking back and forth between their mother and Nathan. Ellie ran out of the house, sobbing. I followed her, trying to comfort her, but she was inconsolable. When we returned, Nathan and Gladys were gone, and the rest of the family was sitting in stunned silence. In the weeks that followed, everything fell apart. Ellie filed for divorce, moving back into her old room at Mom and Robert's house. Robert kicked Gladys out, changing the locks and blocking her number. Mom was devastated, feeling betrayed by the woman she had considered a friend for years. Chris and Connie were caught in the middle, angry at their mother but also struggling to completely cut her off. It's been 6 months since that awful Thanksgiving, and things haven't gotten much better. Ellie is still struggling to cope with the betrayal. She's thrown herself into her work, taking on extra classes and after-school programs. She barely speaks to anyone in the family, often skipping Sunday dinners and avoiding phone calls. Nathan and Gladys are openly together now, which feels like salt in the wound every time we hear about them. They've been seen around town, holding hands and acting like love-struck teenagers. It's especially hard for Ellie, who runs into them occasionally at school events. Robert is trying to divorce Gladys, but she's fighting for a large settlement. She claims she gave up her career to support him and raise their children, and now she deserves half of everything. The legal battle is dragging on, causing stress for everyone involved. Mom spends most of her time taking care of Robert, whose health has declined due to the stress. She's taken a leave of absence from her nursing job to be there for him full-time. I can see the toll it's taking on her. She looks tired all the time, and the spark she had when she first met Robert seems to have dimmed. Chris and Connie are struggling too. They're both adults, but this situation has shaken their world. Connie has sided with Robert, refusing to speak to Gladys. She's angry not just about the affair, but about years of what she now sees as manipulative behavior from her mother. Chris, on the other hand, is trying to maintain a relationship with both parents. He understands the hurt Gladys has caused, but he can't bring himself to cut her out completely. This has caused tension between the siblings, who used to be quite close. I feel caught in the middle of all this. I'm trying to support Ellie, be there for Mom and Robert, and somehow maintain relationships with Chris and Connie. But it's exhausting, and I don't know how to fix this mess. My own life feels like it's on hold as I try to navigate this family crisis. I'm not sure what I'm looking for here. Advice? Support? Maybe just a place to vent. Has anyone else dealt with such a complicated family situation? How do you move forward when trust has been shattered like this? How do we rebuild our family after such a betrayal? Update 1. It's been about 3 months since my last post, and a lot has happened. Thank you all for your supportive comments and advice. I've been trying to navigate this situation as best I can, and I wanted to share some updates. First, the good news: Ellie seems to be doing a bit better. She finally agreed to see a counselor, which has been helping her process her emotions. She's also reconnected with some old friends from college, particularly her roommate Jessica, who has been a great support system for her. They've been meeting for coffee regularly, and I've noticed small improvements in Ellie's mood and outlook. She's even started talking about possibly dating again, though she's not ready to take that step yet. Now for the complicated stuff. Remember how I mentioned that our biological father, Alan, wasn't really in our lives? Well, he suddenly decided to reappear. Apparently, he heard about the divorce drama through some mutual acquaintances and decided now was the time to try to reconnect. To give you some context, the last time we saw Alan in person was at Ellie's high school graduation. He showed up late, smelling of alcohol, and left before the ceremony was even over. After that, his communication dwindled to the occasional phone call or text message. We heard through the grapevine that he had moved around a lot, never staying in one place for too long. When Alan called out of the blue last month, I was angry. Where was he all these years when we needed a father? But Ellie, surprisingly, was more open to talking to him. I think in her vulnerable state, she was grasping for any form of support. They've had a few phone calls, and Alan even visited our city last month. During these calls, Alan shared some of his life story from the past 2 decades. He talked about his struggles with alcohol after the divorce, how he'd lost several jobs due to his drinking, and even spent a few nights in jail for public intoxication. He claimed he hit rock bottom about 5 years ago when he woke up in a hospital after a particularly bad binge. That was when he decided to get sober. I reluctantly agreed to meet him for coffee during his visit. It was awkward, to say the least. Alan looked older than his 62 years, with deep lines on his face and graying hair. He tried to explain his absence, elaborating on his struggles with alcohol and depression after the divorce. He said he's been sober for 5 years now and wanted to make amends. I listened but told him I wasn't ready to forgive or forget just yet. The real shock came when Alan revealed why he was really here. He wants to sue for grandparents' rights if Ellie has children in the future. He claims that now that he's better, he deserves to be part of his potential grandchildren's lives. I was furious and told him he had no right to make such demands after being absent for so long. This has created a rift between Ellie and me. She's considering Alan's proposal, saying that she wants her future children to have a grandfather figure, especially now that Robert is so focused on his own problems. I think she's being naive and setting herself up for more hurt, but she won't listen to me. We've had several heated arguments about this, with Ellie accusing me of being unforgiving and me telling her she's being too trusting. Speaking of Robert, things have gotten messier on that front too. The divorce proceedings with Gladys have turned ugly. She's making all sorts of claims about emotional abuse and financial control. She says Robert was controlling with money during their marriage, giving her an allowance and questioning her expenses. She also claims he was emotionally distant and prioritized work over family. Robert denies everything, of course. He says Gladys always had access to their joint accounts and that he worked hard to provide a good life for their family. He's hurt by her accusations and feels betrayed after years of what he thought was a good marriage. The stress is taking a toll on him. His blood pressure is high, and he's lost weight. Mom is stressed trying to support him through this, attending every meeting with the lawyers and trying to keep Robert calm. Chris and Connie are caught in the middle of their parents' divorce. They're both adults, but it's still hard for them. Connie has sided with Robert and refuses to speak to Gladys. She's been spending a lot of time at the family home, helping Mom take care of Robert and going through old family photos and videos. It's like she's trying to preserve the happy memories of her childhood in the face of this upheaval. Chris, on the other hand, is trying to maintain a relationship with both parents. He visits Gladys at her new apartment and still meets Robert for their weekly tennis games. But I can see the strain it's putting on him. He looks tired all the time and has been drinking more than usual. This is causing tension with Connie, who feels like Chris is betraying Robert by maintaining a relationship with Gladys. As for Nathan and Gladys, they're still together and seem to be flaunting their relationship. They bought a house in our neighborhood, of all places. It's a modest 2-story home, nothing like the large house Gladys shared with Robert, but it's close enough that Ellie had to change her jogging route to avoid running into them. They've been seen at local restaurants and shops, holding hands and acting affectionate. It feels like they're deliberately trying to hurt everyone. I'm still trying to be the peacekeeper, but it's getting harder. I'm worried about Ellie getting hurt again by Alan, stressed about Robert and Mom's situation, and frustrated with Nathan and Gladys's behavior. I find myself playing mediator in arguments between Chris and Connie, trying to comfort Mom when she breaks down, and attempting to reason with Ellie about Alan. All of this is affecting my own life too. I've been distracted at work, missing deadlines and making careless mistakes. My boss has noticed and given me a warning. My boyfriend, Chris, 37M, has been incredibly patient, but I can tell he's frustrated with how much of my time and energy is consumed by family issues. We had plans to move in together, but I've been hesitant to take that step with everything going on. How do I support everyone without losing myself in the process? And am I wrong for being so against Alan's sudden reappearance in our lives? Should I be more understanding of Ellie's desire to reconnect with him? Any advice would be greatly appreciated. Update 2. It's been another 2 months, and things have taken yet another unexpected turn. I'm starting to feel like our family is stuck in some kind of soap opera. Let's start with the Alan situation. Despite my warnings, Ellie continued to build a relationship with our long-lost father. They were talking regularly, and she even invited him to stay at her place when he visited again last month. I kept my distance, still not trusting his sudden interest in our lives. During this visit, Alan shared more stories from his past. He talked about the various jobs he'd had over the years: bartender, car salesman, even a brief stint as a cruise ship entertainer. He showed Ellie old photos of himself performing on stage, wearing a sparkly Alanet and bow tie. Ellie was fascinated by this glimpse into a life we knew nothing about. Alan also met with Robert and Mom during this visit. It was tense, to say the least. Robert was polite but distant, clearly uncomfortable with Alan's presence. Mom was more emotional, alternating between anger at Alan's past abandonment and a strange sort of nostalgia for their early years together. Alan apologized for his past behavior, but it felt hollow after so many years of absence. Well, it turns out my instincts about Alan were right. He wasn't just here to reconnect or fight for grandparents' rights. He was running from gambling debts in his home state. We found this out when 2 very intimidating men showed up at Ellie's apartment looking for him. Thankfully, Ellie wasn't home at the time, but her neighbor, Mrs. Gonzalez, told her about the visitors. Mrs. Gonzalez described them as the kind of men you see in mob movies and said they were asking very pointed questions about Alan's whereabouts. When confronted, Alan broke down and admitted everything. He owed a significant amount of money to some dangerous people back in Nevada. Apparently, his sobriety hadn't extended to giving up gambling. He'd gotten in over his head at a casino in Reno and thought he could hide out with us while figuring out how to pay it back. He even had the audacity to ask Ellie for money, claiming it was to protect the family. Needless to say, Ellie was devastated. She felt used and betrayed all over again. All those childhood memories of disappointment came flooding back: the missed birthdays, the broken promises, the time she waited by the phone for a call that never came. It was like losing her father all over again. I helped Ellie change her locks and phone number, and we reported the situation to the police. Alan disappeared again, and we have no idea where he is now. Ellie is back in counseling, trying to deal with this fresh wave of abandonment issues. I feel guilty for not being more supportive of her relationship with Alan, but at the same time, I'm angry that she had to go through this pain again. On the Robert and Gladys front, things have somehow gotten even worse. During the divorce proceedings, it came to light that Gladys had been embezzling money from Robert's company for years. She had set up fake vendor accounts and had been siphoning off small amounts regularly, which added up to a substantial sum over time. The discovery was almost accidental. Robert's company was undergoing a routine audit when the accountant noticed some discrepancies. At first, they thought it was just a bookkeeping error. But as they dug deeper, a pattern emerged. Gladys had been clever, taking small amounts that wouldn't raise suspicion, but over the years, it had added up to nearly $500,000. Robert was blindsided by this revelation. He's now not only dealing with a messy divorce but also has to audit his entire company and deal with potential legal issues. The company's reputation is at stake, and some longtime clients are starting to get nervous. Robert spends most of his days in meetings with lawyers and accountants, trying to untangle this mess. Mom is beside herself with worry about Robert's health and the future of the company that's been his life's work. She's been trying to get him to eat properly and rest, but Robert is consumed with fixing this situation. I've noticed his hands shaking when he reaches for his coffee, and the dark circles under his eyes seem to be a permanent fixture now. Chris and Connie are struggling to come to terms with their mother's actions. Connie has cut off all contact with Gladys. She's angry and hurt, feeling like her entire childhood was built on a lie. She's been going through old family photos, trying to reconcile the mother she thought she knew with this new reality. Chris is torn between feeling angry and wanting to understand why his mother did what she did. He's been reaching out to Gladys, trying to get answers. But Gladys has been evasive, claiming she only did what she had to do to secure her future. This has only added to Chris's confusion and pain. As for Nathan and Gladys, their relationship seems to be crumbling under the weight of all this drama. The embezzlement revelation has put a strain on their romance. Nathan moved out of their new house last week, leaving Gladys to face the consequences of her actions alone. There are rumors that he's trying to reconcile with Ellie, claiming that Gladys manipulated him. He's been sending Ellie messages, saying he made a huge mistake and wants to make things right. Ellie, thankfully, wants nothing to do with him. She showed me the messages, and we both agreed that Nathan was just looking for a safe harbor now that his relationship with Gladys was imploding. It's hard for Ellie, reopening old wounds, but she's standing firm in her decision to keep Nathan out of her life. I'm feeling overwhelmed trying to support everyone. Ellie needs help processing Alan's betrayal, Mom is stressed about Robert, and even Chris and Connie have been reaching out to me as a neutral party in their family drama. I'm starting to feel resentful of always being the stable one, the shoulder to cry on. I love my family, but this constant drama is affecting my own mental health and relationships. My boyfriend, Chris, has been incredibly patient, but I can tell he's frustrated with how much of my time and energy is consumed by family issues. Last week, Chris and I had a long talk about our future. He pointed out that we've been putting our plans on hold for months now because of my family situation. He wants us to move forward with our lives, look for an apartment together, start planning for our own future. Part of me wants that too, but I feel guilty at the thought of focusing on my own happiness when my family is falling apart. How do I start setting boundaries without feeling like I'm abandoning my family in their time of need? And how do I start focusing on my own life and relationship amidst all this chaos? Update 3. It's been 6 weeks since my last update, and I can hardly believe what's happened in that short time. Just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, life threw us another curveball. First, let me address the Alan situation. After disappearing again, we thought we'd seen the last of him. But about a month ago, we received news that Alan had been arrested in Las Vegas for attempted robbery. Apparently, he was desperate to pay off his gambling debts and made some very poor choices. The details are sketchy, but from what we've been told, Alan tried to rob a small jewelry store off the Strip. He didn't have a weapon, just a note demanding money. The store owner managed to trigger a silent alarm, and Alan was arrested before he could leave the premises. It's a sad end to his story, but Ellie and I both decided not to get involved. It's harsh, but we've been hurt too many times, and we need to protect ourselves. Now, onto the biggest shock, Gladys is pregnant. Yes, you read that right. Our 55-year-old stepmother is expecting a child. The father? Nathan, Ellie's ex-husband. They announced it on social media of all places, which is how we all found out. The post was a photo of Gladys and Nathan holding a sonogram picture, with the caption "Love finds a way. Baby, last name, coming soon." The comment section was a mix of congratulations from people who didn't know the full story and shocked reactions from those who did. Ellie was devastated all over again. Just when she was starting to heal and move forward, this news brought all the pain rushing back. She's taken a leave of absence from work and has been staying with me for the past week. I'm worried about her mental state, but she refuses to see her counselor. She spends most of her time in the guest room, only coming out for meals. I've been trying to coax her into going for walks or watching movies with me, anything to get her mind off the situation, but it's been challenging. Robert is in shock. The idea of his soon-to-be ex-wife having a baby with his former son-in-law is almost too much for him to process. His health has taken another hit, and he was briefly hospitalized for chest pains last week. The doctors say it was stress-induced angina, a wake-up call that he needs to take better care of himself. Mom is beside herself with worry. She's practically moved into the hospital to be with Robert. I visited them yesterday, and Mom looked like she had aged years in just a few weeks. She's torn between anger at Gladys and concern for Robert's health. The nurses have had to remind her several times to eat and rest herself. Chris and Connie are struggling to come to terms with the fact that they're going to have a half-sibling who is also their step-niece or step-nephew. Connie has completely cut off contact with Gladys, blocking her on all social media and refusing to take her calls. Chris, on the other hand, is torn between curiosity about his future sibling and anger at his mother's actions. He's been reaching out to me more, trying to make sense of everything. As for Nathan and Gladys, they seem to be reveling in the attention their announcement has garnered. They've been giving interviews to local media, painting themselves as star-crossed lovers who found each other later in life. In one particularly cringe-worthy interview, Nathan talked about how Gladys's maternal instincts attracted him, completely glossing over the fact that she was his former mother-in-law. It's sickening to watch them spin this narrative while our family falls apart. In the midst of all this, I've been trying to follow the advice many of you gave about setting boundaries. I had a long talk with Chris, and we've decided to take a 2-week vacation to get away from all the drama. We're going to a small beach town a few hours away, somewhere quiet where we can relax and reconnect. I've informed my family that I'll be unreachable during this time. The reactions were mixed. Ellie was hurt, feeling like I was abandoning her. Mom was understanding but worried, asking me to keep my phone on in case of emergencies. Robert seemed almost relieved, telling me to enjoy myself. Chris and Connie were surprised. I think it's the first time they've seen me prioritize myself over family drama. I feel guilty about leaving when everyone is struggling, but I also know that I need this break for my own mental health. Chris and I are planning to use this time to discuss our future and whether we can build a life together with all this family baggage. I'm not sure what I'll come back to after these 2 weeks, but I know I need to start prioritizing my own happiness and well-being. Is it selfish to step back from family drama? How do I balance my responsibilities to my family with my need for personal happiness? Thank you all for your continued support and advice. It means more than you know. I'll update again after my vacation if there are any significant developments.